because the police have been talking about the situation in respect of the protesters. 681 persons. That's the number of people that may now be in custody. And the police is saying that they are investigating what really went wrong. 9 police officers may have been injured, and there was a scare that one of them may have died. But there are other incidents that have happened in the last 4 days since this protest began. Let's get some perspectives to this, because it's concerning, isn't it? The world also monitor what is happening in the UK. There are protests there, and it has happened over the last 2 days. But in Nigeria, where you have an escalation of some of these issues, really culminating into burning and destroying government private properties, that it calls for a lot of rethinking about the manner in which security agencies handle this kind of situation. I'm being joined by Dr. Kabiru Adamu, who is a security expert. Thank you so much, Dr. Adamu, for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Good evening, Sean.
Security-wise, how do you assess the protests in the last 4 days?
I think the most important thing is to remind ourselves that the protests are happening within the context of the security situation in Nigeria. We should also remind ourselves that within the State Fragility Index, Nigeria still occupies a very precarious stage. At the last time I checked, we were at number 15 globally. That means of all the over 200 countries in the world, we are the 15th most fragile states. And what are the reasons that make our fragility obvious? Number one, the inability of state institutions to maintain law and order, as an example. The existence of non-state armed groups that are challenging the supremacy of the use of force by the state. Sometimes the alleged heavy-handedness of our security forces, proliferation of small arms and light weapons and things like that. So it is in that environment that the protests, are taking place. I think it's also important to mention the outcome of the 2023 elections. There are still a significant number of politicians who are aggrieved, are not happy with the outcome of that election, both at the federal level and then at the state level, especially in core states like Kano, Rivers State, and a few other states where the incumbent and a few other persons who lost, sometimes within the same party, are also unhappy about that. Then the economic circumstances that the country is in at the moment. Of course, the cost of living crisis, which has been well documented. And then, of course, the environmental issues that are happening, the climate change. So this is the environment in which the protest is happening. Now, all of these factors will either support or in some instances take advantage of gaps that are created by the protest. I didn't mention the geopolitical component. I'm sure you've seen in some parts of Kano where Russian flags are being waved.
What does that mean, though?
It's a geopolitical consequence of the coup in Niger. After the coup in Niger, you saw the same thing happening, the popularity of the junta, and then Russia playing a role. Almost out of nowhere, Russian flags emerged, and they became part of that coup cycle. Now, a lot of youths in the northern part of the country were watching that. And there's a chatter, and I'm using my word carefully, that the ruling junta in Niger, which is CNSP, is also taking advantage of the gaps that have been created by the protest. So all of these are the issues that are playing out. The protesters may have a genuine intention, but they don't have the capacity to manage all of these complexities. Unfortunately, too, the state, enough notice was given to the state that the protest was going to happen. And if I'm going to assess the action of the state in managing that, I would say the state also failed to prevent all of these factors that I've mentioned.
You mean the federating units, the state government?
The federal, the Nigerian state. Because there was enough time. We knew that those protests was going to happen. And there are persons who have responsibility.
Well, I mean, the government for almost a week or more was expressing this fear about this protest. And those are saying, why is the government not let them protest? But that the government will come out to say, look, see what we told you was going to happen, that this was going to escalate so badly. I mean, so if you look at it, is the federal government right about its fears about the possible, not particularly about the innocent Nigerians who were genuinely agitated about the state of affairs in the country, but those who wanted to take advantage of it.
Like I explained to you, there are different forces that are at play. I wouldn't use the word take advantage. They are already there. They are waiting for gaps. Those gaps opened up, and then they stepped in. Now, the state, by virtue of Section 14, subsection 2 of the Constitution, has the responsibility to provide security. If you extend it to the social contract, which also says that we've let go of certain of our rights and the state has the responsibility. And so to that extent, I do not think it's right to point a finger and say, we said it's going to happen. Now, why didn't you arrest anyone? Why didn't you prevent those threat elements who are challenging the supremacy of use of force by the state? So that excuse, I honestly don't buy it.
I mean, all of these outcome and the fallout that we've seen, do they in any way, just as some people feared, raise any concern about illegitimate means of wanting to topple the government?
To an extent, yes. I started by talking about the 2023 elections and the outcome of 2023 elections. Anyone who is doing an analysis of Nigeria and does not take that into consideration would likely fail. It is a vibrant force. It is a force that is even playing out. If you picked the papers yesterday and today, which I'm sure you did, you've seen politicians making statements. In fact, one of them called on the International Court of Justice to come in, and because of the alleged killings of Nigerians. So that's a factor. Several politicians, in fact, even within the ruling All Progressive Congress, are unhappy and would take advantage of opportunities like this to show the weakness of the government.
In the manner in which Russia has been blamed, Russia looks like the ghetto gangster that everyone in the community always want to blame for anything that happens. Democratically speaking, American government had blamed Russia for infiltrating his democratic space at some elections and influencing the elections. And there are those who are also thinking that Russia is trying to find a way of infiltrating the African political space, and they fear the implication of the Ukraine-Russian war, and those who are aligned or do not align, and that those who are thinking that it does look like Russia wants to pose itself as a global political force as against what we have seen in the establishment, the United States, the United Kingdom, China, and the rest, and they wanted to put their mark in the global political stage. And when you see those flags, those Russian flags, in some part of the country being raised, and they're in their numbers, not one or two of them, do you think that the intelligence community needs to then now critically be looking at the possibility for an external influence in our politics and democracy?
If they are not doing that, then it's a shame and it's unfortunate.
So it's not a local trouble alone. We might be having on our hands a trouble or a crisis of an international dimension.
Definitely. We started having we're the beautiful bride. The resources at our disposal makes us the beautiful bride. And there are several countries that are interested in shaping the outcome of a lot of things in Nigeria, and of course by doing that, having stake, within the country. Russia is one of them. China, and then all the Western powers are also, at play. Now, unfortunately, our ability as a state to determine our interest and project that interest in a manner, because the truth of it is we're a member of the Global Committee of Nations. We're a player, and so we can't isolate ourselves. We need those players. But what most countries do is to determine their course and then let the other countries come in. I had cause recently to ask some people within the intelligence community, what is the strength of our counter intelligence or counter espionage functions in Nigeria? Sheun, that's a question that is yet to be answered. And so Russia is there, it's playing a huge role. All the other countries that I mentioned are playing huge roles. China, which has, more or less embedded itself within a lot of our functions, is also playing a huge role. And all of these countries are here with their interest. If we allow their interest to be projected, then unfortunately we are at their mercy. And sadly, that is what I'm seeing at the moment. They are determining outcomes with very little influence from our side. You can't stop them because, yes, like I said, we're a global part of the Global Committee of Nations, but we can make it extremely difficult for them. And in doing that, make sure our interest is not just projected, but it is our interest that is seen and that it is respected. We're not doing very well at
this. This is probably one of the protests that we're seeing on the global stage, on the national stage, that from the beginning, the issue of military takeover, insurgent infiltration of government, and a possibility of toppling of a government is coming in. What do you think is responsible for this narrative that is cropping up, either true or false?
I think, unfortunately, and the good thing is you just interviewed the Minister of Agriculture. Food affordability is a challenge in Nigeria. And when you allow a man to reach a stage where to even feed himself becomes difficult, then his humanity is put at a stage where he can do so many things, sometimes even without his conscience. And I think, sadly, that is where we are at the moment. What I see happening in parts of Nigeria where the Russian flag is being waved, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, especially on the social media space, where we're not doing very well to counter. And because we're not doing very well, the persons at the end are grabbing. And when they grab, they project it with associations like that. But I don't see any genuine indicator that would tell me, for instance, that there are forces at play behind what we're seeing. If we allow it to fester, then those forces can step in, just like I said at the beginning.
But there are those who say within the sub-region, there are at least 2-3 countries that the military junta has now held sway, and nothing has happened.
Exactly.
Nothing has. In fact, the matter being that they are now very popular with a huge percentage of the population of those countries. And there are those who will say there are copycatism in politics of the world. Whatever you see happening, and we've seen it play out in Africa a lot of the time. You look at how many countries got independence around the same time. Is when one country gets it, another country, it becomes a popular and something that people copy and paste it within their own region. And there are those who will say, if in fact these countries that the military had a takeover, they became the bride of the leadership of the sub-region. It tells something. Could this be also a factor to encourage this kind of
definitely
this kind of nonsense? Because anybody thinking about a military takeover, as far as I'm concerned, is a nonsense.
And I think the beauty of it is immediately after the last coup, which was in Niger. And of course, our president was sworn in as the chairman of ECOWAS. He reiterated this point. If I remember well, he made mention that this will be the last time there will be a military coup in the sub-region. And then, of course, the rest, of course, is history. Unfortunately, however, we haven't seen much of action followed up by that declaration. As like you rightly pointed, more than a year into the Nigerian coup, they've still not announced the transition plan. Mali is still being ruled by a military junta. Burkina Faso is still there. Guinea is still there. So that, unfortunately, has the potential of affecting other parts of the region. The circumstances in Nigeria are completely different. It will be very difficult, really, for what played out in those countries to play out in Nigeria. But I think it's a warning to anyone who before now felt that there is no influence in terms of the geopolitical developments in Nigeria. This is a wake-up call to remind us, especially our intelligence community, to remind us that happenings in the sub-region do have an impact in Nigeria, especially in these circumstances where, like I said earlier on, they are grabbing. They are looking for some form of leadership, and anything that comes their way, they will grab.
Take a look at what Atado Peter Side, for example, said. He said, let these protests end today, Sunday. Whether or not that will be yielded on, the president in his broadcast made it explicitly clear. I have heard you loud and clear. Go back home, return to your homes, and let the line of dialogue be opened. And that those who will say beyond the rhetorics of go back home is also the fact that those who are behind the protest should also be aware of the security implication of that. Do you think?
In my honest opinion, and based on the assessment that I did, I think they are aware of the consequences. What has not been put forward to them is what they are going to get in return. They put out some demands, and like we all know, in such circumstances, there are the latent demands, and then there are the hidden demands. Now, what I would have expected over time, since this protest started, the idea of the protest started a couple of weeks back, what I would have expected is our intelligence cycle should have, beyond determining the obvious stated objectives, demands, what are the other latent demands, so that some form of compromise, engagement can be done. I do not think at the moment, given all that has happened and given the type of attention that they've been able to generate, which inadvertently was actually given to them by the government because of the way they gave the protest and then went about engaging and giving it a lot of media coverage where we are. So I do not see them heeding to these calls. What I hope to see is some form of compromise, especially the validation of their request. If they're saying food is expensive, if they're saying they can't afford health, if they're saying they want an increase in wage, they're talking about the National Assembly, at least let's validate those requests. Call for dialogue, just like the president has called for dialogue, and then come out with tangible ways on how you are going to be there. We've listened to the president. He's reeled out several policies, but the challenge is this, Shehu, and I heard you talking to the minister about that. In terms of what we're seeing on ground, the impact is not being felt. Food is still extremely expensive. Right. Health is not affordable to the average Nigerian. And that's where the crux of the matter is. Until people on the street who are protesting are able to see those tangible changes, then there's nothing you're going to tell them.
I mean, the implication is what the security agencies did or did not do, or what they did wrong. See what Professor Wole Soyinka has said. He's condemned, he's criticized the manner in which, according to him, lethal treatment being given to the protests. What do you make of that scenario?
I mean, the Prof's statement, I would want to remind every listener that we are not where we were. Progress has been made, but yet we are not where we want to be in terms of the equipment repository at the disposal of our security forces. And because we're deploying them in that manner, there will be casualties. But when you look at the overall casualties, I think they've done very well. But of course, we need to improve from there. I'll give you an example. In Kano, I saw videos of military men who went in aid of a particular warehouse that was being raided. And they were able to gather, I think it was granite oil or whatever it was in jerry cans, and then sacks of rice. Some of the hoodlums followed them and were taking those items from the vehicle. Those guys were armed. In the past, they will use their weapon. They didn't in this instance. And we've seen several instances of our security forces being injured. So I think their approach so far has been measured, and they deserve commendation for those extent of measurement. But the onus is on us to make sure we equip them. Shehu, in Protest 2.0, which is what we're dealing with. If anybody thinks that's not what we're dealing with Protest 2.0.
What does that mean?
It means it's modern day protest that has various factors at play. Some of the sponsors are not even in Nigeria. They're outside the world. Some of the sponsors are using the cyberspace, both the open one and the dark web, to carry on what they're doing. And we do not have the capacity and capability to manage it. So we need to arm our security forces with the requisite equipment to be able to manage such protests with the least fatalities. And I think so far they've done quite well with the equipment that they're disposing.
About 4 or 5 states declared curfew, and those states were in the north. You see relative peace within the southern region of the country.
Apart from the Delta State.
But usually you see more of the marching and the protest and the demonstration in southern Nigeria. But this time around, things became, you saw the agitation more in the north. Is this also political in nature?
So all the factors I mentioned earlier on played out more in the north. The consequence of the outcome of the 2023 elections, the poverty level, and then another factor that also played, and I think inadvertently the federal government played into that. Just before the protest, there was a lot of chatter within the northern part of the country that ulamas senior clerics had been given money to dissuade voters. So their ability to calm the people now is lost almost completely. Traditional rulers too lost that ability.
And the Zanga, which does not literally mean a peaceful marching. It does look like a riotous gathering.
Zanga to that extent. You also have to remember, there are, like I said, there are so many things at play. Islam, at least the way I understand it, does not encourage protest. So traditionally, a northern Muslim who understands who is a Muslim should not even protest in that manner. And there are reasons for that. It's not within the remit of the conversation.
I have just about 60 seconds to close, but let me show you this, and you have about 30 seconds to please help me make sense of it. You look at the list that the police have said, 681. Those are the number of arrests, and they stated it in the days they did all of that. And the police are saying 9 police officers sustained various degrees of injuries. And that narrative of police killing, because the police had come out to say that's not true. They mentioned an incident in Kebbi where they said one local government, local vigilante man shot and killed one of the looters. And also in Borno, said about 2 incidents, the IED, which they seem to have linked into an ISWAP or a Boko Haram attack, and an incident of 2 civilians being killed. And police say, look, they've tried as much as possible to be civil. Can you wrap up for us on these 3 in 30 seconds?
Yes. The truth of it is more people died than what the police is saying. We were able to document, as at the second day of the protest, 21 people dying. Who killed them is what we don't know, because unfortunately there are weapons at the disposal of all the actors that I've mentioned. Only a forensic investigation would determine who died. But I'm quite delighted that for one of the few times in our history, the police has come out with figure documenting what happened. And I think the onus is on especially those of us outside to determine whether what the police reeled out is the fact or not. But more people died than what was that. Who killed them is what we don't know.
Kabir Adamu is a security expert. Thank you so much for indeed coming to speak on this matter and give perspectives to it. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you for having me.